Hello and welcome back to my channel if this is your first time here. Hi, I'm Cassidy. If it's not, thanks for always tuning into my videos. Today we are going over my April wrap-up, Realmathon wrap-up, all the books I read in April, the books I read for my teams, for my realms in Realmathon. I had the best reading month that I've ever had, I think. I read 26 books in April. A lot of those were short, so I didn't think that it was going to be my best in terms of page count, but I did beat my average page count, which is about 4,000 to 5,000. I read 6,236 pages in April. That's insane. Literally insane. Apparently I needed this competition. As for my actual TBR, I failed it. Completely failed it. I didn't even get to the From Blood and Ash prequel, and I DNF'd a lot of books. I didn't try Stolen Tongues either. So we mood read April. Mood read April in the end. Oops, sorry. It worked for me though. So we have a lot of books to talk about, so I'm gonna get really into things right now because I have a lot of talking to do. Interestingly enough, the first book I read in April was a romance book. I read it for the Can a Fantasy Reader Like Contemporary Romance, and I read It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. I gave this book a very low 3 stars. If you want my full thoughts, you can check out the vlog, but essentially, contemporary romance just doesn't do it for me because there are no stakes. I really liked the vibe of this book. It follows a rich influencer girl who has no problems in life, blah blah blah, because she's rich and has all the money, who gets sent to a small town by her stepdad, and she meets this gruffy fisherman man, and sparks kind of fly and things happen. I really liked the small town vibes in this. I loved the fisherman vibes. I like to fish. I feel like I don't look like a fisher. Well, I don't like to fish. My boyfriend likes to fish, and I like to sit on the boat while he fishes and read. But it's a pastime that we spend a lot of our summer nights doing, and I felt like I liked this vibe. I liked the small town vibe. I liked, as an influencer myself, I liked the vibe. She's definitely not the most likable character at the beginning, but I enjoyed it, except for I liked it until they got together. They get together. There's no stakes. I know how a romance book is going to end, and I just don't really care about it or enjoy it in the end, because I want to be on the edge of my seat, but in romance you're not. Once they're together, and it's just so I don't have much to say about this one, just that contemporary romance just really isn't for me, and I kind of figured this out. The next book I read this month was The Dragon's Bride by Katie Robert. I somehow got suckered into reading some monster smut. I blame Bobby, but a bunch of us read it on livestream one night. It was a good time. It's only like a 200-page ebook, and it definitely was not worth my $5, but I also really enjoyed the experience I had with everyone reading it, and it was hilarious. I am not a Katie Robert fan. I have really learned that I do not like her writing. She uses tropes. She uses the same kinks and tropes over and over and over again. One that I'm really not fond of that comes up in this, which is like a pregnancy trope, as well as some slight daddy kinks and all this other jazz. There is a double eggplant in this book, which was having me laughing and hilarious, and I did actually enjoy the sex scenes if you like the smut in this book, but this book had potential because it started off really good. There's a really cool world being made, and I actually will, even though I'm telling you right now that I don't like Katie Robert, I will be continuing just because I had a laugh reading this book, and it is a series, so when the next book comes out, which is a Kraken monster romance, I'm probably gonna attempt it with my friends because we just had one heck of a time reading this. I gave it 1 star in the end? 2 star. I gave it 2 stars in the end. If it had been given a little bit more plot, it would have been really, really interesting, to be honest. And I mean, the dragon has 2 eggplants, but they also invert, and they use the tail. I got a tail scene, guys. Finally. The next thing I read was just a comic graphic novel. I read Extraordinary by V.E. Schwab, which is part of the Villains series. It was a duology, but it's becoming a trilogy, I believe. And this takes place in that villain's world. I gave it... Wow, I need to stop going back because I need to know my ratings. I read so much I can't remember. I gave it a low 3 stars in the end. I just felt like it was a pointless comic graphic novel. Didn't really do anything for me. It kind of just relayed what happened in the first 2 books, but with a new character. And yeah, it was kind of I felt like it was more like a, we can do this and make money off of it, versus... this was already completed, and We don't need more stuff, which is, I feel like, how I'm gonna feel about the third book. So I'm kind of nervous. The Vicious Vengeful duology is the Villains series by V.E. Schwab, which follows, it's like a sci-fi series. It's following characters who find out that they can get powers, and they're called extraordinaries or EOs, and we're just following these morally gray characters who could have been heroes but are actually villains, and something that happens as they give themselves powers, and I can't really describe it to you. I really enjoyed this duology series thingy and it reads really fast, and I definitely highly recommend it, especially if you kind of are looking for something a little bit more unique and different, just not the comic. And then I finished The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. My bookmark is literally still in here, but I finished it. This took me a hefty amount of time to finish, to read, to complete. I'm really not a fan of these books. I am buddy reading them with my sister and her roommate, and I give this one 2 stars. It's so slow. I honestly should have given it 1 star because I'm not sure I even have any idea what happened in this book. I just kind of read with my eyes opened. I read the words but didn't actually osmosis them into me. So yeah, but I have really pretty editions, so I need to read them and at least say I've read a classic. And I am enjoying being able to like pick out the Tolkien influence from other people's writings. That's why I want to read this series. It's just such a classic and a stepping stone for fantasy today that I feel like I need to indulge in it a little bit, even if I hate them. We are currently about to start the next book, and I'm not excited for it, but I read this one. I'm not going to tell you what it's about, because everyone knows what The Lord of the Rings is about, right? Well, that's good, because I have no idea what this one was about. The next book I read was The Fall by Ryan K. Hill. This is the prequel to Of Blood and Fire by him. This is a prequel novella, but it's actually recommended to read between books 1 and 2, and I read it that way, and I really enjoyed it. The Fall was a 5-star read for me. The whole issues with Of Blood and Fire were completely fixed in The Fall. The writing is fast-paced. It's literally a military. You're just watching a battle go down in the, 150-page prequel novella. It was so good, and if you are wanting, like, dragons, like, literally dragon bonding, flying on our dragons type stuff, this series, specifically The Fall, but I highly suggest reading this one first, and then reading The Fall, and then continuing to Of Darkness and Light, even though Of Blood and Fire definitely has its flaws and I only give it 3 stars. The Fall got 5 stars, and so I'm very excited that Of Darkness and Light is also going to get 5 stars. Highly recommend. Of Blood and Fire follows a series where our protagonist stumbles across these new strangers and is kind of thrust into a world that he never really knew about, and a war that he didn't really know was even a thing, where he happens to find a dragon egg and may happen to be bonded with a dragon egg and he's not supposed to be the chosen one, but essentially he is the chosen one. There was no like destiny for him. No one ever thought that he would exist, but he now does, and is thrust into the war, thrust into the battle, and dragons will reign supreme one day again. I love this cover with the dragon egg. I'm sorry, I'm going super fast. I have so much to talk about, and every single one of these books was in a vlog this month since I weekly reading vlogged. The next book I read was Bromance Book Club, which I gave 2 stars and I absolutely despised. Okay, well, I didn't absolutely despise it, but it wasn't good. Same thing, I just don't like contemporary romance. It's a thing I have figured out. There's no stakes in it, but also there were so many flaws in this book. There is the whole book, the literal whole book is miscommunication, but for the stupidest thing. The premise of Bromance Book Club is that a married couple is contemplating divorce because she has been faking it the entire time, and faking her orgasms the entire time, and he finds out and kind of overreacts, but then she overreacts, and then there's a divorce happening, and it's all miscommunication for no reason, and it just irked me so much. It's a second chance romance, and the one benefit to this book was that the portrayal of male characters in it was so good. Normally I hate romance books because men are just portrayed in I don't know, it might be the way that most people want men to be portrayed as, but it's not realistic, I find, and I prefer a more realistic approach to what men are, and I really liked the men behavior, the grossness of what they do when they're all together, and yeah, there's a turkey scene in this, and the turkey scene was so good, and so, on par to what men are like. Yeah, I liked that part, but I hated the rest of the book. That's the only reason that book got 2 stars. Again, I read that for the Can a Fantasy Reader like contemporary romance vlog. And then I read Prince of Thorns by Mark Lawrence, which I gave 4 stars, a very high 4 stars, which was really nice considering I bought this beautiful special edition from the Broken Binding. This one is hard to describe. Prince of Thorns follows our prince who witnesses something when he is very young, and then at the age of 12 becomes like the leader of a band of mercenary thieves, and you're kind of just following his journey as he is seeking revenge for what he saw happen. And it's very dark, very grim. There's a lot of dark humor. It's crude language. This is not a book for everyone. There is rape, there is murder, there is a lot of not nice things. Like the way our main character talks about women is not nice. His thoughts about animals aren't always nice. But it fits. It's meant to be that way, and it fits our protagonist very well, so it doesn't bother me, but it could bother you. I really, really enjoyed this book. I love Mark Lawrence's writing. It really just speaks to me. The found family in this, the humor in this, all just worked with a plot that worked for me in this one. I really enjoyed it. I like that Mark Lawrence tends to play with timelines in his fantasy books, so in this book, you have our present day, and then you have 4 years earlier, and you're following both of those timelines, so there's like kind of 2 things happening that you're figuring out. And it's something I really just enjoy in fantasy books. Prince of Thorns does that. Red Sister kind of does it a little bit different, and so does Rune of Kings does that as well, and I really like that, I find. So if you have any other books with like timeline differences that are fantasy, please recommend them to me. I would love to know them. I technically didn't read these after, but I'm just gonna skip ahead and talk about them because this month I also read King of Thorns and I soft DNF'd Emperor of Thorns. King of Thorns only got 3 stars from me in the end. 4 stars, 3 stars, and then I soft DNF'd the last one. I still enjoyed King of Thorns, but it is a lot. It's more of the first book, and we didn't really get a plot as much. You're just kind of following your characters again, and it's very similar. It's a very similar plotline to what you see as in the first one, and I kind of get why it is similar, and then the last one is the same again, and you're kind of just like replicating what happened, but for a different part, obviously Prince, King, Emperor. But I just wanted more, and I wanted more of the magic system and all of that, so although I still enjoyed King of Thorns, ended up soft DNFing Emperor of Thorns. I didn't actually read a whole lot of high epic fantasy this month, so maybe I just kind of slumped a little bit, so I'm hoping to just soft DNF Emperor of Thorns and come back to it, and maybe I'll enjoy it at a different time. Yeah. Soft DNF'd this. And while we're on the terms of soft DNFing, this month I also tried The Blackhawks by David Regg, which is a book I picked up because Jade absolutely loved it and adored it, and typically me and Jade have very similar styles. I don't know if it's because I had picked it up right after coming off of these books, but I ended up only getting like 50 pages into this and DNFing it. I had the audiobook and everything, I just was not enjoying it. I felt like it was very surface level. I couldn't get invested in all the characters. They all sounded the same to me, and the humor just wasn't doing it for me. I feel like that partially was coming off of these where the humor is so dark and crude, and this was like attempting to be crude, but it didn't go dark enough for me to enjoy it, but it was like also not light enough. Like it went in between fluffy and crude, and it just didn't get there for me. But I also, as much as I do love humor in my books, I want more of a plot. I need more than just the humor, and I just wasn't getting that from here. And it was a very similar style and very similar plot to this series, and so I think coming off of these and not loving it, I just could not get into it. I've decided I'm gonna hold on to the first and second book and try them again in the future and see if that helps me. But I don't have high hopes for it anymore. I have a feeling Mel didn't overly love it, and me and Mel are more spot on than me and Jade most of the time. So I have a feeling this one is just not going to be it for me, but I'm going to give it another try again. Another book that I DNF'd this month is Justice of Kings by Richard Swan. I attempted this one. I DNF'd it really early on. I only got to page 65. Me and the writing style were not vibing. I did not enjoy the writing style. I also kind of felt tricked, which I feel like didn't help my enjoyment, because the Justice of Kings is described as this like man being judge, juror, executioner, and going to all these worlds and then stumbling into like a conspiracy plotline that could take down the ruling system and all of that. And you're not even following that man. Like, you are, but you're in a girl's POV, you're in a woman's POV that's, like, watching him, and I wanted his POV. I wanted to be him and watch all of this unravel. I did not want to be a viewer watching it unravel, if that makes sense. But, in general, the writing style just really, really didn't work for me, and again, Mel didn't overly love it. I trust Mel's thinking. Jade loved it, so this is kind of nervous for me and Jade. Jade gave it 5 stars. I DNF'd it. Again, I think that this will be a soft DNF. I do want to give it another try, but also I know Erin didn't really love it, and me and Erin also have a very similar taste. And I trust Erin's opinion, especially when she loves the book. So, I'm very, very nervous. Also, it's not doing well for it that RJ Barker has a blurb on it. Just saying. Another DNF that is probably going to be soft DNF'd, but might not be. We'll see. I want to love it because I love this cover. The next thing I read was 4 volumes of Locke Key. I technically read 1 and then read a little bit more and then read the last 3, but I read for Peace Talks. I really, really enjoy the Locke Key show. This book/show follows a family where the father is murdered, and when he's murdered, he tells them that they will be safe if they go back to his childhood home, which is Key House. So they move back to Key House, and the kids start to find magical keys that open random doors and do weird magical things to the house, like opening a door that lets you become a ghost, and this kind of such and such. And there is a plot line happening of why the father was murdered, and there's like this evil bad guy. It is actually a horror fantasy graphic novel series, and the TV show, although not horror, does lean towards the dark side. I was obsessed with the TV show, so I picked up the books, and I will say the books are darker and grittier, and I love them too, but I suggest both. I read the first 4 graphic novels. I think I gave them all 4 stars. I loved them all, and I would highly suggest picking this one up. It's oddly grim and whimsical all at once. For another short book, I read Skyward Comic. I didn't absolutely love this one. I didn't really enjoy the ending. It's kind of a thing that I don't really like happening at the end of a book, and I think that it could have been done much better. I can't really explain to you. This follows a world where something happens and gravity no longer exists, and so you're following people who are trying to cope and live with a world without gravity, and what will happen if you accidentally lose your grip on something and you float up into the atmosphere to never be seen again and die. Dark, but also not dark. This is very YA in my opinion, and I don't know, it just wasn't something that really pulled me in. It is a cool sci-fi idea, but not really for me. That's all I gotta say. More Peace Talks books. I read Sour Candy by Keelan Patrick Burke. This is a little short horror novella. I'm not even going to tell you what it's about, because if you know what it's about, you're going to ruin your enjoyment for it. I gave it 3 stars. This is freaking weird. This is the weirdest book that I think I've ever read. I really enjoyed it, but I feel like if you're not ready to just accept the weirdness, you won't. And also, I will say I was not expecting actual sour candy to have such a big part in this book. I don't know, weird. I liked it. It's a little spooky, and it's such a short read that I definitely would recommend picking it up. But be prepared for the weirdest thing you've ever read. Peace Talks, I was in a horror mood, so then I picked up Slimer by Harry Adam Knight. This is a creature feature. You're following a cast of characters whose boat sinks in the ocean, and they can't call for help because they threw off all their phones and stuff because they were on an illegal drug deal. They somehow end up making it to an abandoned oil rig in the middle of the sea, and when they get there, obviously they realize the oil rig has, they kept finding clothes strewn out on places as if a body had been in them, not necessarily how you would throw clothes if you stripped and took them off. And then creepy stuff starts happening, and yeah, I can't really say. It says something deadly is stalking them one by one, but it's not just a horrible death they have to fear, it's what comes after. I really enjoyed this one. I gave it a high 4 stars. My sister hated this one though, so I think you have to bear in mind that you are in for a campy creature feature. And I mean like bottom of the barrel genre. This was written in the 80s and is an indie published book. It's not for the faint of heart. You are having terminology that should not necessarily be said. You are a lot of sex, a lot of rape, a lot of just like horny teenagers and being horny when you shouldn't be because something is stalking you. Just very reminiscent of this genre, and I love these books, but I also know they're not for everyone because of language and trigger warnings. and all of that stuff. It is very interesting, but I would say if you are prepared for it, it was a great time. There is one scene in here that, like, it just makes you laugh. Like, it's so extreme, and it's very action-packed. You're on the edge of your seat the entire time. I love a good creature feature, so highly, highly recommend. And then the next book I read was The Overnight Guest by... I have no idea who this is by. Oops. And I read this because both Mel and Ryan gave it 5 stars. They loved it. They said it follows a couple tropes that I really like to read about. I ended up giving it a middle-of-the-road 3 stars. Not that it was a bad book, but I think I just didn't overly love it, and it wasn't what I wanted from a thriller book. I typically want my thriller books to be thrilling. I want them to be a little bit more action-packed. I don't really want a mystery. So I think that that becomes a difference. There's a lot of mystery thrillers that go around, and I'm not as intrigued in the mysteries most of the time. I need a more action-packed book, and this one was oddly enough a mystery that the author tells you how it ends from the beginning. So it's a mystery, but not a mystery. And I think that's what bothered me. It was a little bit action-packed, but I just knew everything at the beginning already. There was one POV that I felt like shouldn't exist in it and was giving away too much that I couldn't enjoy. Like, there needed to be a fine line of telling me how the book was going to end, but also leaving me wanting to know how we got there. And I felt like I was given up too much. I also felt like I had read the synopsis for this book, and the synopsis led me astray, and that's not what I was expecting from the book. I was expecting a cozy winter cabin, snowstorm, with a kid outside. I don't even really want to explain this book to you because I don't want to give anything away. We're essentially following a true crime writer who rents out a cabin where something bad crime happened years before, and she's kind of using it as inspiration to write her book, where she finds a random kid outside, and things start to happen. I think I was expecting more like creepy vibes from the kid, and it just kind of let me down. It's still good. I would still recommend it to people, but just not my favorite thriller ever. And then I read Comfort Me with Apples, and this is a little short horror novella that everyone seems to love. I gave it 3 stars, maybe 2. I gave it 2 stars. It just didn't give me what I wanted from it. It didn't give me the atmosphere. Like, everyone screams that it's, like, very spooky atmosphere, and I get what the book was doing, but I didn't like it. And I was still kind of confused by a lot of things, and that could be my own fault, is not having a very religious background and not knowing a lot about religion. But yeah, I felt like it just wasn't for me. We're essentially following a woman who finds a hairbrush with different hair that's not her own in her drawer, and she starts to rethink everything she's ever known. That's all I'm going to tell you. It's a little short novella, so I don't want to give anything away. It is Adam and Eve inspired, I will say. And then I read There Are No Saints by Sophie Lark, which was a 5-star read for me. I absolutely adored this. This was the last book I read for the Can of Fantasy reader, like contemporary romance. I can't like contemporary, but I can like dark romance is what we have decided on. This is a serial killer romance. We're following a serial killer and a girl. You're essentially following a serial killer who has a rivalry with another serial killer, and the other serial killer kidnaps this girl, leaves her on the side of the road for our main serial killer to find, and romance blossoms. It's weird. It's weird. You can't even call it a romance because it's just pure obsession, but it's so good. I really enjoyed this one because there are stakes the entire time. I could not decide if he was going to stick his banana in her pocket, in her pouch, or kill her. Like, what was he gonna do? I don't know, the entire time, and I loved it. I loved it for that, and I loved the, like, creepy obsession. I loved the dark, tortured villain, and I really, really enjoyed this one. I don't really want to say more, but I definitely hopped on the Sophie Lark bandwagon for this one. Gave it 5 stars. Regretfully afterwards, I read the second book in this duology called There Is No Devil and absolutely hated it. Gave it 1 star, despised it. For people who didn't like the first one, you might like the second one, or if you didn't like necessarily how dark the first one was, you would like the second, but I think that if you liked the first one, the second is not for you. The second one follows a plot line that is set up in the first book, but you don't get that plot line until 80% of the way through the book. Most of the second book is learning about our character's tortured past. And this sounds terrible, but her past didn't matter to me, and honestly, the past that was set up was not as terrible as it could have been. Like, it was terrible, like, don't get me wrong, but, like, there's a teddy bear scene in it, and I just, like, couldn't feel for you and this teddy bear. Like, I don't know if that makes me heartless, but it's a freaking teddy bear. You're, what, 15? 12? I don't know, it's a teddy bear. Maybe I'm just heartless, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're just kind of learning about their past, and his past was interesting, but I also didn't need you to make him, to, like, give him more. Like, I didn't want to think that he was better than he is, and that's what I felt like Sophie Lark was trying to do. I liked my torture villain, I did not want a tortured hero. I didn't need a redemption arc for him. I wanted the second book to be Bonnie and Clyde, villains, they're on a murdering spree together. I wanted to see that darkness. I didn't get that at all. I got a whiny couple simping over each other, and a lot of sex scenes that were very, very, very bizarre. There is a shaving scene, there is a scene covered in clay. It was odd, it was weird. I felt like the second book was written by a different author, and yeah, did not like it. Do not recommend, but still read the first one, because the first one is good. And then this month I also read Glint by Raven Kennedy, which is the second book in the Plated Prisoner series. I also gave this book 2 stars. Hee. What a great month for me. This is a fantasy romance follow that is a King Midas retelling. We're following our protagonist who has been touched by King Midas and turned into solid gold, essentially. And she is now the most loved pet of the king, and romance happens, but romance doesn't happen. It is a fantasy romance story where the romance is nowhere to exist going into the third book. That drove me insane. This second book, in my opinion, was useless. There was a little bit of plot, like, we went from point A to point B during this book, but it just happened way longer than it needed to be. This could have happened at the beginning of the third book or the end of the first book, so, you know, got rid of the second book, and it would have been set up the same. I really think that this whole book is about her trauma, and her trauma is done really well, because she is very... She has a lot of Stockholm Syndrome, and Raven Kennedy does a really good job discussing it, and discussing her kind of realizing this, and realizing that her captor is not Prince Charming, and she shouldn't be in love with him. He's doing cruel things to her. But I need more than just good mental health rep in a book. I need plot. I need to be invested. I needed a romance that didn't feel forced, because there is a little bit of tension between 2 characters, but it was very forced in my opinion. I just didn't love it. I am continuing the series. I'm hoping that with the third book, when you come into, like, the real plot and the romance, I will like it. But yeah, currently not a fan. Then I read another novella, The Citroen Key by L.L. McRae. You can get this novella for free on the author's website if you sign up for her newsletter, and I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 3 stars, and like most novellas don't get good reviews from me because they're just so short, but I felt like this one did a very good job of introducing me to its unique magic system. We are following a world where there's spirits, and some spirits take the form of dragons, and they're kind of like to be scared and not messed with. And in this novella, you're following characters who are going on a little quest, and they have to survive a dragon. This thing done. I don't really want to tell you a lot. It's 150 pages, so if I tell you lots, it'll give it away. This is the prequel novella to The Iron Crown, which is the Dragon Spirits #1. I'm very excited to read that book. It is an indie self-pub book. I'm just intrigued, and this novella did such a good job of getting me invested into that world. The characters in it are lacking, in my opinion, and she does spend a decent amount of time trying to get you to know the characters, which I didn't need, because in 100 pages, I'm not going to be invested in your characters anyway, so I don't read novellas like this wanting to love characters, because I just won't. I'm not a character-driven reader anyways, and it takes me a long time to be invested, but the world that was set up is really intriguing, and I'm very intrigued for the next ones. I think they are a little YA, but I'm okay with that, and I liked her writing style, so I definitely would suggest. She has 3 novellas on her website that you can get. I downloaded 2. They're all prequels to her series, and I think that it's kind of a good idea for an indie author to do, or a self-pubbed author, because it's kind of like a taste test. You can read that little novella for free and then decide if you want to continue on her books. And then the last couple books I read, I started the Mindf series by St. Abbey, which spells stabby. The greatest pen name to ever exist. And I really, really enjoyed these. This is another serial killer romance. We are following a serial killer and a detective this time who fall in love, but obviously the detective doesn't know that she's a serial killer, and he's on her case and trying to find out who the serial killer is. I'm not completely done this. I've read the first, second, third, and fourth book. I gave the first 3 stars and the fourth book 4 stars. I'm currently reading the 5th book, and I'm very excited to finish the series off. I really, really adored this series. It's like watching an episode of Criminal Minds. The romance in here is honestly not a strong suit. It's really not. If you are a romance reader, you might not like this one, because the romance is not heavy. The romance is not the basis of this book. The plot line between the serial killer, what the frick happened to her and her backstory, and it's disgusting. What made her who she is, why she's on this quest for revenge, detective trying to find out all of this stuff, is the forefront of the story. And it's delicious, it's incredible, it's great. They're about 100 pages each. You can get them all on Kindle Unlimited, and I would highly suggest. I really, really, really enjoyed them. They aren't for the faint of heart. There is rape in them, a lot of rape, and murder. And the murder starts out fade to black at the beginning, but as you go on into the series, you start to see her torture more. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed this one. I don't have much to say, but I would recommend. And the last book I read this month, which I technically finished in May, but I'm still counting it because I read the majority of it in April, is The Bone Ship Wakes by R.J. Barker. This was the 3rd book in the Tide Child trilogy, which was the series picked for my book club, Backlist Book Club. Hated it, hated it, hated it, hated it. Don't read this series. I gave the first book in the series 4 stars, and then when my book club talked about it, I lowered it to 3 stars, then I gave the second book 3 stars. I give this one 2 stars. This is objectively the best book in the series, okay? Objectively, the best. Unobjectively, I absolutely hated it. One, the problem is I'm just so uninvested that I don't care what happens in this book. The first book had me intrigued because of the world, and the world is what gave it a higher rating, but the characters and the plot in this, where are they? What are they? Even the world building in the end, because I missed a heavy amount of world building that my entire book club didn't get. So I'm not the only one that didn't know the world was like poisonous and that trees didn't grow, because they literally are trees. I don't care if you put another name on it and call it something else because it's purple instead of green. It's still a tree, and when you say you're running through a forest, I'm still imagining purple trees. I don't know. The characters in this are very one-dimensional. The ending of this book really, really, really pissed me off. I don't know. The plot ended up being like so different from what I was sold on the back of the first book, and I'm used to plots changing after a first book, especially if it's a high epic fantasy that streams so many pages long. Like Mistborn, you're sold a heist in the first book, and then the second and third book are not about that heist, because obviously that heist has been completed. But the plot that happens in the second and third book makes sense to the plot that happened in the first and what you're sold in the first. We're not stopping a fucking dragon war in this. All I gotta say. I don't know. I just really, really, really didn't enjoy this. And I don't know a lot of people who did that read my book club, that were in my book club. So I'm in the majority here, and I love it. But I do know a couple people who I think I have similar taste to that love it, such as Library of a Viking and Dominish Books. I didn't understand, and this is a series that I fully, like, normally I can understand why you like it. I cannot understand why someone likes this. I did not enjoy this. There's no plot, there's no good characters, the world doesn't make sense half the time, and yeah, sorry if you like this book. Why has it been praised by so many authors I love? Honestly, I feel like especially with the writing style is very wordy, and I just felt like it was very one-dimensional. Like, I didn't get the politics I wanted. I don't know. Sorry. Not sorry. This series is being yeeted out of my house. So yeah, that's everything I read in April. I had a very bumpy month, but I feel like that's only to be expected when I was picking up so many books, and lots of books that were different for my reading taste, like romance and horror and graphic novels and comics. I was definitely experimenting a little bit with my own reading taste, and that leads to a lot of lows happening, but I also had a decent amount of highs, and I had 2 books that could be on the best of the year, so that's pretty exciting. 2 5-star reads, and I don't give out 5 stars very often, so very, 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 very exciting. and I'm very happy, and Realmathon was such a hit that thank you to everyone who joined and participated. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video and you'd like to leave me an emoji to say you were here, you know what, leave me a boat emoji. We're doing it. And if you'd like to connect with me on other platforms, my Bookstagram, my Book Twitter, my Goodreads, and my Patreon are all linked down in the description bar below. Have yourselves an absolutely remarkable day.